On this Thursday night, the first arrests in the assassination of Haiti's president. Who's been caught, the country's deepening turmoil, and the new details about the ambush on Jovenel Moïse. Breaking news on the Assembly of First Nations election for a new national chief, the candidate who just dropped out. Fully vaccinated and confused.
I thought, vaccine's vaccine.
What happens to immunized Canadians who didn't get Canadian-approved shots? And fans banned from the stands.
It will feel strange.
Get ready for the very subdued Summer Games.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We begin in Haiti, where tonight there is deepening chaos and confusion after the assassination of the country's president. Nearly 48 hours after the brazen attack, authorities say they are still hunting for those who planned the operation, but they say they are making progress, tracking down the gunmen involved. They say multiple suspects have been killed. 6 have been arrested, including one man who is reported to be an American. Authorities have provided no evidence linking the suspects to the assassination, but the prospect of foreign involvement has stoked widespread anger. Mike Armstrong has tonight's top story on the growing unrest in a country already steeped in turmoil.
Cameras captured the moment police arrested 2 men Thursday they believe were involved in the assassination of the Haitian president. The pair was apparently caught by people in the neighborhood hiding in bushes and turned over to police after being roughed up. They killed the president, this man says. We're going to make them suffer. According to local media, there are now 6 men detained and 7 other suspects who've been killed in shootouts with police. At least one of them, according to reports, would be an American, a man who at one point commanded the team of bodyguards at the Canadian embassy in Haiti. Now, new details are coming out about the attack at the president's home. These are images posted by a Haitian media outlet. Jovenel Moïse was shot 12 times, murdered in his bedroom. His wife was also shot several times. She's been airlifted to a hospital in Florida. The couple's daughter was hiding in a bedroom of the home. 2 servants had been tied up.
We need to understand what happened.
Haiti's ambassador to Canada says investigators now believe some police officers were involved in the attack. The home is in a residential neighborhood with multiple security checkpoints and police officers who are supposed to be acting as guards.
The fact that the president and his wife were practically the only person killed, that means someone opened the door for them.
Now, Haiti is already a country struggling economically, socially, and politically. But the president's death leaves a gaping power vacuum. The man who should have replaced him under the Constitution, the country's chief justice, died of COVID-19 just last month. Between poverty and the coronavirus, it is a humanitarian crisis that will worsen even further without leadership.
The first order of business is to resolve not so much the question of the assassination, but the question of power.
The next few days will be important for Haiti. Aid groups are already struggling to get help into the country. A power struggle could make a desperate situation even worse. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Breaking news tonight from the Assembly of First Nations. A new national chief has just been elected. The vote began yesterday to name a successor for Perry Bellegarde, who stepped down after 7 years. And the race was down to 2 candidates. Former Ontario Regional Chief Roseanne Archibald from Tequatagmu Nation and Reginald Bellerose, the longtime chief of the Muskowgan First Nation. Just a short time ago, one of them dropped out. Our Michael Couture joins us now. Mike, tell us what happened.
Yeah, Farah, Roseanne Archibald is the new AFN national chief after Reginald Bellerose conceded and dropped out of the race Thursday evening. Now, Archibald becomes the first woman to lead the Assembly of First Nations, and she called it her story in a week where Mary Simon was appointed as the first Indigenous Governor General.
Voices are being heard that were never heard before, and we will not be silenced. Goodness and love will prevail.
Goodness and love were planks of her campaign, and Indigenous advocates say Archibald will do things differently.
A lot of the other candidates, I would say in summary, talked about fighting for jurisdiction and fighting for rights, and which is also very important. But this is a little bit of a different take in starting with the love and heart matters first.
Now, Archibald's election ushers in a new era for the AFN, and it ends a vote that spanned over 2 days. The field of 7 candidates narrowed after one round and was poised to go much longer until a surprise decision by Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, who dropped out just before the 3rd round wrapped up.
I support my friend Roseanne Archibald to be the next national chief.
That support made it a much tighter race. The new national chief will have little time to celebrate. The country is at a critical juncture on the road to reconciliation with the discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves of residential school children. Some believe Canadians are awakening to the reality in Indigenous communities and feel that can be turned into an opportunity.
We need to create a momentum from here and start creating real lasting changes that will also could end up becoming part of new constitutional talks.
But who will those talks be with? Well, speculation continues to swirl that Canadians will be heading to the polls by the fall, meaning new National Chief Archibald could be dealing with a new federal government. Farah?
Michael Couture in Ottawa. Thank you, Mike. The New Democrats are calling on the federal justice minister to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate crimes against Indigenous peoples at former residential schools. Nunavut MP Mumalak Kakak says offenders need to be brought to justice.
Enough is enough. Indigenous people need truth and justice. We need full and independent investigation that has the power to shine a light on every facet of this national crime, and that has power to bring perpetrators to justice.
The Justice Minister's office responded in a statement saying he does not have the authority to initiate criminal investigations, but will consider all options that will allow survivors, their communities, and the country to move forward on the path to healing and reconciliation. Canada's first Indigenous Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, says she will not run in the next federal election. The independent MP for Vancouver-Granville says she decided not to put her name forward for re-election, in part because she is dismayed by the state of Canadian politics. In a letter posted online, she says it has become more and more toxic and ineffective while simultaneously marginalizing individuals from certain backgrounds. Federal politics is, in my view, increasingly a disgraceful triumph of harmful partisanship over substantive action. Wilson-Raybould won her seat in 2019 as an independent after being kicked out of the Liberal Party during the SNC-Lavalin affair. More pain for the leader of the Green Party. 2 staffers were reportedly cut from Annamie Paul's office at a time when other federal parties are ramping up their representation ahead of a widely expected election call. Now, it all comes after the party's rising star, Jenica Atwin, crossed the floor, joining the Liberals. Ross Lord reports on the Green Party's internal turmoil.
As federal parties ramp up public appearances to get their messages to Canadians, now is not the time to attract attention for all the wrong reasons. But that's what's happening to the Greens, the only party whose leader, Annamie Paul, is not already an elected member of Parliament. A string of internal controversies, including the defection of star MP Jenica Atwin over the party's position on Israel, threatens to stain the once ascendant Green brand.
Well, I'm worried about that. We have so much momentum. The Green movement has so much momentum around the world.
There's been momentum in Canada, too. On Prince Edward Island, the Green Party came out of nowhere to become the official opposition 2 years ago. Gains in federal politics have been smaller, but as fighting climate change becomes a bigger priority for voters, analysts say this should be a time for green glory. Instead, they say the party is unraveling.
If the party does not stand behind the leader, how can the party, in good conscience, ask for your vote if they don't have their internal house in order? And so I think these sorts of questions have to be resolved immediately. I think she's honestly potentially past the point where this can be resolved.
Others suggest patience is required with any new leader.
I totally give her the support to make mistakes and to learn.
With the number of paid party staffers reportedly being cut in half, Paul may now be without key support personnel when it matters most. She's blamed internal feuding on a small group of rogue councillors, suggesting she's being attacked in part because she's a black woman. Her office declined Global News' request for an interview. The party executive is set to hold a confidence vote later this month on Paul's leadership. Ross Lord, Global News.
Big news tonight for parents in British Columbia. The federal government and the province have reached a deal on funding childcare.
As part of the agreement, in the next 5 years, we'll work with the provincial government to achieve an average of $10 a day childcare for all regulated spaces for kids under 6.
Trudeau says the agreement will also create 30,000 new spaces for children under 6 before 2027. BC is the first province to accept the federal offer of subsidized childcare. CP Rail is pledging $1 million to support wildfire recovery efforts in Lytton, BC. Global News captured these images from outside the exclusion zone. You can see the houses that are reduced to rubble. The fire on June 30th destroyed most of the village. 2 people died and several others are still unaccounted for. The Prime Minister met with the Premier of the province and the Mayor of Lytton today to check in on the recovery efforts. On Friday, a bus will take residents on a tour of their community. The cause of the fire isn't yet known, but there is speculation it was sparked by the braking of a passing train. One province's plan for vaccination passports. Coming up, what this means for those who are unvaccinated, plus what happens when you get immunized with shots that are not approved in Canada. Pfizer says it will ask the United States for emergency authorization next month for a 3rd booster dose of its COVID-19 vaccine. Pfizer says early data shows that another shot within 12 months could dramatically boost immunity and potentially help better protect against the Delta variant. Delta is now the dominant strain in the United States. The drug maker is also talking with regulators in other countries. Plans are underway in Quebec to roll out COVID-19 vaccine passports. The province says the digital passport system could be implemented by September after everyone is given the chance to get both doses. If there's a spike in COVID-19 cases, Quebec could use the passports to exclude unvaccinated people from some non-essential services like gyms or bars. The province says the system could help prevent another lockdown. As of tonight across Canada, 44% of people 12 and older are fully vaccinated. 78% have had at least 1 dose. And while that is progress, there are signs Canada's vaccine uptake is beginning to plateau.
We should not assume we have crossed the finish line. While Canadians are steadily coming forward for second doses, the rate of increase for first doses has slowed.
Dr. Theresa Tam is urging everyone eligible to get their shots to help Canada get ahead of highly transmissible variants before the fall. And for some vaccinated Canadians abroad, there's a new problem that's emerging as they look to travel home. Those who got vaccines that were not approved by Health Canada are not eligible to skip quarantine. As Jamie Mauracher reports, that's led to frustration and confusion.
Though Shannon Lee is fully vaccinated against COVID-19, she isn't able to bypass the 2-week travel quarantine.
My best shot to get any vaccine was to, take the chance and do it in China. So I didn't really consider, I thought, vaccine is vaccine.
Because the 30-year-old received the Sinovac and Sinopharm vaccines while overseas, which are not yet approved by Health Canada, new federal travel guidelines don't apply to her.
If every country does this, we're going to have chaos.
Only 4 drug makers' COVID-19 shots are approved for use in Canada: Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Bioethicist Carrie Bowman says COVID shots should be regulated internationally.
I feel the only solution is to look to the vaccines that the World Health Organization has approved.
But not all experts consider it that simple.
When Canada authorizes a vaccine for use within Canada, it's conducted a very sophisticated, meticulous evaluation of all the scientific data supporting the vaccine, as well as evaluation and, in some cases, on-site inspection of the manufacturing facilities.
For those who can't wait for wider Canadian approvals, revaccination may be a short-term solution.
I don't see medically that there would be a reason they'd be concerned about that.
Lee, who travels for work, is considering a whole nother double dose.
Hopefully I won't have to deal with this much longer.
Well, experts note that mixing vaccines has provided a powerful immune response for many in preliminary studies. There's currently no data on combining 3 or even 4 different shots. Farah?
Jamie Mauracher in Toronto. Thank you, Jamie. Still ahead, the hurdles one woman faced when she brought her husband home from long-term care. When the pandemic hit, the decision to remove a loved one from long-term care and bring them home was a complicated and painstaking one for many Canadians. Families struggled to balance concerns about isolation with the risks of COVID-19. For one Ontario woman, the decision was clear. Barbara Human chose to take her husband out. But what she soon learned was that the process was easier said than done. Mike Drolet reports.
This was always the plan, retire in the relative tranquility of rural Ontario. But life is rarely that simple. And after Frank Carlucci suffered a traumatic brain injury, he needed more care than his wife Barbara Human could provide. And he ended up in a long-term care home.
I honestly thought this is where he's going to be for the rest of his life.
Everything changed with the pandemic. For 2 weeks, she would visit and sit outside his window. His isolation, she felt, was too great. And with the progress he had made in physio, she decided to bring him home.
You don't want people to discover issues like this after they've actually left the home. You want them to, go with, eyes wide open.
The biggest hurdle, Barbara was told, was if Frank's health deteriorated and he needed to return.
A lot of those people are getting told the same thing as me. If you take them out, you lose your bed.
She offered to continue paying for the bed, but was told she couldn't. Of even greater concern, Frank's doctor told Barbara he could only treat her husband if he was in the home.
I called him, I begged his office, begged them.
She had no choice but to accept the doctor's decision, but remained steadfast with hers. It was made easier by the fact that Ontario, like several other provinces, determined residents who leave long-term care homes can return to them without going to the end of new wait lists. But there's a catch. The policy ends whenever the pandemic does.
If Ontario basically says as of September 1st, we are now, the pandemic is now over as far we're concerned, then, after that period, then, you're not protected under these changes.
Ontario's Ministry of Long-Term Care told Global News in a statement, residents who choose to leave homes not in outbreak are discharged. It's not what Barbara hoped to hear, but at least it's definitive, much like her resolve.
It was a little bit scary, but I knew it would work out. I just had to be positive and do what I had to do what was best for him.
It's her way of promising him true care for the long term. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Competing without crowds next, what an Olympics under a state of emergency means for athletes. Fans won't be a problem at the Tokyo Olympics. All spectators have been banned as Japan prepares for a 4th state of emergency in the capital due to COVID-19. Now, these games will be different from any ever held before, and many wonder why they're still even going ahead. Crystal Gamansian looks at how our Canadian athletes are feeling.
A warm welcome for British athletes arriving in Tokyo, but their Olympic experience will be like no other. Spectators will now be banned under new emergency restrictions as COVID-19 infections here have reached a 2-month high.
We'll support any measure which is necessary to have safe and secure Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Until now, officials were unwavering in their position that the Games would be a display of triumph over the pandemic. But some experts say all of the changes to the Games may affect athletes.
For most top performers, it will feel strange, and it may actually make them a bit concerned that they may not deliver their best performances.
Fans clad in flags, packed venues, and screaming spectators are a part of the Olympic experience. Swimmer Penny Oleksiak had a record-setting Olympic debut in Rio. She knows Tokyo will be very different.
I'm sure we're just going to stay in a little bubble. It's not going to be anything too exciting, but just to go is really, really fun.
The chance to compete is also key for sprinter Crystal Emmanuel.
For me, I just stay focused on the goals at hand and, put it to my team to get us there safe and back.
The Canadian Olympic Committee is consulting regularly with public health.
I think everyone is going in, as you say, with their eyes wide open, recognizing the risks involved, and certainly the epidemiologic situation in the general population, what's happening generally in Japan, obviously, I think is very concerning for the authorities there.
The state of emergency in Tokyo is set to remain in place throughout the Games until August 22nd. It could be extended to cover the Paralympics as well. All a part of an experience unlike anything the world has seen before. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
The past year and a half have been unlike anything we've ever seen before. That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Take a look at tonight's Your Canada. It is this rainbow over Last Mountain Lake in Saskatchewan. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and each other.